Seats. We have enough seats for everyone. Good morning. Give you guys a seat. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Drew. I'm a 5 child, and I think I missed maybe an email or a text or a Zoom call where we voted on who would facilitate today, so it ended up being me. But I want to thank everyone for coming. Certainly, we got a lot of extra challenges thrown at us today. My father always liked to keep things low key, so I think he arranged the storm to try to keep it low key. But despite that, everyone made it. So we're really, on behalf of myself and my family, just really want to thank everyone for giving us all the comfort in the last couple of days, as well as being able to make it today. So thank you very much. And I think hopefully today will kind of be an echo of my father's kindness and the things that he loved in life, and his unconditional love. A lot of times when we're thinking about what we're going to do in the program, we said, what would Pops want? How would Pops handle this situation? So hopefully today reflects that, and we'll try to get through it quickly. But my father loved words, as some of you know, and he also loved music. So without that, and he also loved his grandchildren and his children, of course. So without that, we'll try to honor him today in what we do. And without any further ado, we'll ask Hannah Shea Martin to come up. When Hannah was born, I don't know if he was more excited about having another grandchild or a granddaughter who has a palindrome. So, we called her Hannah Shea Martin, or Hannah Shea Stadium Martin, and then later Hannah City Field Martin.
I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya? It's like this, the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. We saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew ya. She tied you to her kitchen chair. She broke your throne and cut your hair. And from your lips, she drew the hallelujah. 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 Or maybe there's a God above, but all I have ever learned from love is how to shoot somebody who outgrew ya. It's not a crime that you hear tonight. It's not someone who's seen the light. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Pops often told a cute story. He's 10 years old, he's in Sunday school, and he rats out one of his classmates. And he says, "Teacher, teacher, Johnny had his eyes open during prayers." How do you know, Paul? Barbara and me and Anna and David were so blessed, very much blessed to have him spend a lot of time with us. Almost every night he was at our house and we gathered around the table and we set up prayers. And oftentimes he led the prayers and he was such a wonderful prayer. He really was. And I guess from his Sunday school days with a lot of thines and thys and thou arts, and he learned his lessons well. And I can attest to the fact that he, when he prayed, he prayed devoutly. His head was always, reverently bowed, and his eyes were tightly shut. How did I know that? I hope he doesn't hold it against me. The first reading is in Psalm 23, and I took this from the King James Version of the Bible. I think it's appropriate with brethren, Christianity. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The next reading is a very hopeful one. It's from John 14. This is where Jesus comforts his disciples. Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. I am the way and the truth and the life." The last reading, I think it's appropriate. We had to include Pop's namesake, St. Paul, and perhaps his most famous verse comes from Corinthians, and we're probably all familiar with it from weddings. But I think if you pay attention, I think we'll see that this reflects on Pops. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It's not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Now, if you'd like to, no pressure, but I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer, and no need to keep your eyes closed. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they fix, the one you'll know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them inside and know they love you. And you of tender years can't know the fears that your elders grew by, and so please help them with your youth. They seek the truth before they can die. Teach your parents well, their children's hell will slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they fix, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, as if they told you you would cry, so just look at them inside and know they love you. All right, so we love words, we love music, so naturally we love poetry. As one of the less musically inclined Martins, I'm here to share a poem with all of you. Called If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. If you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you give your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it in one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve you long after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose a common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
In this world, there are givers and there are takers. Pops was a giver. I took this somewhat for granted until I started visiting him more often during COVID. People would say what a wonderful daughter I was to make the drive, but I loved having him all to myself, listening to his newspaper war stories and sharing my own. He read all my articles and was my biggest fan. With Pops, I always got a lot more than I gave. Though I might have had a slight edge as the only journalist in the family, Pops was proud of all his kids in his quiet, never braggy way. All 6 of us, doctor to cop, had careers we loved as much as he loved his. And we are all good writers and great hyphenators. He gave us that gift too. He gave us the example of grace under pressure. Despite the 6 kids, drafty old Victorian house, and long line of used station wagons that were always breaking down, he never raised his voice or even seemed stressed. He just shrugged his shoulders and have a bunch of us push the car to the shop at the technical high school where students would fix the car for free. Fix. Luckily, it was all downhill. Even in the most dire situations, Pops remained cool. Once in the late 70s, a gang of thugs were threatening to rumble outside our house, something to do with an altercation involving Eric and Drew at the housing project's basketball courts. Eric will deny it. Pops came out and stood on the porch, apparently unfazed. I don't remember exactly how, but somehow the problem and the gang melted away. Maybe being last in a long line of Lancaster Mennonites, pacifism was in Pop's DNA. Not long ago, after a meal with the May family, someone spotted a moth on Pop's living room ceiling, and we began jumping on chairs and swatting at it with broom handles. He just laughed at our silliness and said, only partly in jest, why can't we all just coexist? Pops was so wise and well-read that in the days before Google, we'd call him for information or advice on almost any subject. He always made his point gently, never in a gotcha kind of way, even though he was almost always right. Only Pops could be so loved by coworkers when his job was basically to correct them all day. Letters have poured in that talked about his sensitivity and kindness as an editor. Publisher Peter Kahn wrote, "Your father was our hero. More than anyone I can think of, he personified our values of quality, integrity, and collegiality. A great journalist and a gentleman in every sense of that word." A few days before he went into the hospital, Pops emailed a suggestion to Bill Power, who's here with us today, who is editor of the grammar newsletter Pops started at the Journal. It was about a mistake a reporter had made in not using the possessive with an ing verb. To illustrate his point, Pops provided an example that read, "Do you mind my nitpicking?" Pops cared a lot about grammar and accuracy, but it was still better to be kind than right. Born fatherless in the Depression, Pops learned to appreciate simple pleasures, like getting an orange for Christmas, or listening to the cast-off records of the wealthy woman his mother worked for as a nurse. There was never a hint of regret about being a poor latchkey kid. Instead, Pops remembered how much he loved cuddling in the attic at night with his sister and mother, listening to radio shows. Pops never cared the slightest about material things, labels, or the latest fashion. Over the years, we tried to upgrade him by buying him fancy ties and brand name sherry. He'd insist you couldn't tell the difference between Taylor and Harvest Bristol Cream. Once we even set up a taste test to prove him wrong. It never worked. He'd always return to what was good enough for him. At the same time, he was breathtakingly generous with his children and grandchildren. He gave us the gift of showing us what was really important in life. Pops passed on his love of sports too. Unable to play as a child for medical reasons, he managed his high school sports teams and college. When he played with us, all that pent-up competitiveness came out. He never let us win. That frustrated me no end, until the glorious day, marked in all caps on my 1968 calendar, when I finally beat Dad in ping pong. One day when I was about 7, shortly after I got my new scoliosis brace, my lovely torture device, Pop saw me sitting alone in the living room while my siblings played softball outside. When he asked why I wasn't playing, I explained that I couldn't bend over to pick up the ball. He took me outside and showed me how I could squat to field balls. I never sat on the sidelines again. Pops was a generous correspondent. After leaving Lancaster in the 60s, he wrote letters to relatives in triplicate titled Dear Ones, filled with anecdotes about the time 3 small Martins got lost in the city after the Thanksgiving Day parade, and what happened when Eric swallowed 27 cents. Years later, his own kids got newsy family emails too. They were part of the glue he provided that kept our family together. Dan Kelly was one of Pop's many colleagues who told us how much he loved working with Pops and how much he taught him, and decades of journalists at the Journal, how to shape a mass of facts into a news story. His constant pursuit of the best way to write a passage was an inspiration. Dan said he has hundreds of old emails from Pops. This is a quote: "From time to time, I call a few of them up at random and reread them. Without Paul to exchange notes with about language and other things like football games, my life would be so much poorer." Pop's greatest legacy, though, may be his generosity of spirit. Though he didn't attend church, he embodied the values most religions preach: love one another, be kind, be present, appreciate and accept what we're given. Evie calls him an undercover Buddhist. Funny label for a lifelong old school Republican, but it's also uncannily apt. It wasn't just his kids and colleagues who were inspired by him. His neighbor told us how she used to like watching Pops from the window, tenderly helping his sweetheart Roberta up the steps and into the car as she became more frail. Kindness was his signature, she said. In our sleep-deprived, shattered state after Pops left us so suddenly, when some of us, okay, me, were irritable, Barbara, who was cut from the same soft cloth as Pops, reminded me to channel him and ask myself, what would Pops do? I am so grateful for your legacy, Pops. I am so grateful for you, now and forever. Before or seen any preview of it, that was amazing, covering so many bases. Thank you, of course, everybody for being here. It takes my breath away to see everybody walk in places, and thank you to my brother Drew, who at the last minute decided to live stream it. Greg, I'm sorry, you could have stayed home. So thank you for everybody that's here live, and for those that are joining us remotely with everything that's gone on over the last weekend and COVID and everything else. Thank you for all the messages and presence that had in our lives today. And 9 years, I want to say how many years. When I was growing up, Mom sometimes said, "Monica, you're just like your father," which wasn't always meant as a compliment. After a while, I thought, wait, is that really a bad thing? Not to detract from Mom's good qualities, but I think she had a point. I am my father's daughter, and that's something I've always held close. More recently, I think it's worth noting that he was uncomplaining, caring, and yes, funny, right up to the end. I'd like to share some of his observations from those 2 weeks in the hospital, because they illustrate so much of who he was, even as things were going rapidly downhill. Healthy as could be beforehand, after he was hospitalized, kicking and screaming, for a lung infection, other problems cropped up. His comment on the phone to us was, "I never realized I had so many things wrong with me." And days later, as things weren't getting any better, "I don't know what to worry about next, so I don't worry." Between us, I think he did worry, but he said he didn't, hoping we would worry less. He was confined to bed in the hospital with that lung infection. He said only partly in jest one day. He told us, "My sheets were changed today by 2 professional wrestlers." When I said well into his hospital course, "Dad, we really want to get you out of here," he replied, "I'm pretty sure Medicare wants me out of here too."
Then there's the caring part. During phone call updates from his doctor, she'd say, "I really like your father. He asked how I'm doing." And when the family finally got to see him past the inhumane no visitor barrier 2 weeks in, he asked me about my family, including how's Joanna, the 4-month-old great granddaughter he hadn't yet met. As that just like your father's statement from long ago reminds me, hey, that's exactly how I want to be. I cherish Mom's comment when I get a glimpse of his characteristics in myself and in my siblings, and my sons and nieces and nephews, and in my granddaughters, and yes, also in my husband Jim, brother-in-law Dave, Greg, Martha, who all loved him like a father. He was incredibly smart with a better memory than anyone I know. And as someone wrote on Facebook this week, he had a special sense of humor and irony and an exceptional generosity of spirit. A special sense of humor and irony and an exceptional generosity of spirit. I hope each of us will consider paying it forward, paying those qualities we're recounting here today forward, just like my father.
I'm Eric. I'm 55 years old, but I'm still referred to as the baby of the family. My dad would say, "Greetings." There's a headstone in Ireland that reads, "Death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal." As we recount these wonderful stories of our dad today, I know that anything I say will be inadequate, but I thought I'd share one of my earliest memories, which was of calling him at the Wall Street Journal. This was back in the day when the phone company charged a toll for calls from the outer boroughs, like Staten Island, into Manhattan. However, my dad was frugal enough to find a workaround. If we called his newsroom and hung up right before the call was answered, our family wouldn't be charged for the call. So we dial his desk, which he shared with a bunch of other copy editors. We let it ring once, hang up, and wait for him to call back. It was the dad signal, and it worked like a charm. He always called us right back. But what impresses me to this day, though, is that he always took the time to chat with us, and he never rushed us off the phone, even though he was in a very busy newsroom and often up against a tight deadline. During my college years, I came to appreciate calls with my dad even more, as I realized he wasn't just my father, but a close friend and confidant. He was the first person I'd call when I needed advice, had news to share, or needed an update on my brothers and sisters. Sometimes I'd mail him articles I'd written for the campus newspaper. He'd always mail them back with his compliments and the occasional red mark, noting a grammatical error my editor missed. On a recent Father's Day, I gave my dad a coffee mug inscribed with the words, "I am silently correcting your grammar." But the truth is, he was seldom silent about it. He was, however, always gentle, diplomatic, and even subtle. Like when one of us kids was telling a story around the dinner table, all it took for us to realize that we misspoke was his raised eyebrow. We didn't necessarily appreciate it at the time, but his persistence made us better speakers and writers, and he instilled in us an abiding appreciation of the English language. Perhaps the highest compliment a son can pay to his father is to emulate him. And like Monica, I took it as the highest compliment when anyone suggested I was just like my dad. That's because I loved and respected everything about him, his charm, his good humor, his optimism, and his ability to endure life's hardships without complaint. A few months ago, I got a chance to interview my dad about his family roots and earliest childhood memories. There was much I hadn't known because his interest in other people was such that he didn't usually talk about himself. The topics we covered included the death of his father before he was even born, his heart murmur, which at the time was considered life-threatening and kept him from playing sports, his paper route, which helped him support the family while his mother took in laundry to make ends meet, and how he got into the habit of drinking his coffee black. It's because when he started drinking coffee, a cup of coffee cost 10 cents with milk, but only 5 cents without. So he drank it black. To say the least, his were humble beginnings, but he made the most of them. And at the end of the interview, I asked him what advice he'd give to others, and he replied, My best advice is to not take advice from people like me. But if pressed, I might say, you should do the best with the hand that is dealt to you and don't look back with regret. From what I saw, my dad lived by those words, never have regrets, and live life to the fullest. God bless you, Pops, and rest in peace.
Hi, everybody. My name is Evie Talmas, and I am Roberta Gardner's daughter, and my sister and our husband's partners are here too. And I just want to say, oh, yeah, of course. We live in California. We barely get to take our masks off. I just want to say thank you to the Martin family for including us in this, for allowing us to speak. And somewhere along the way, Laura and I were bestowed the coveted honorary positions as number 7 and number 8. And I can't tell you what that means to us. When I got the call from Julia that Paul's hospital situation had taken a turn for the worse, as Paul would say, as me, I should say. I was in an all-day Buddhist retreat on death and dying. The takeaway in a non-Buddhist summary is impermanence is part of the human condition. Get with the program and you'll suffer a whole lot less. That's 8 hours squished into 2 sentences. Maybe. But maybe what we're all feeling today is part of the human condition too. That a loss this great feels awful and awfully permanent. Our mom, Roberta, fell in love with Paul. And at first I loved him because of how he loved her and how he made her feel within his presence. But as I came to know him, I loved him for who he was, apart from the caretaking, steadfastness, and devotion he showed to her up until her last days. Paul came to the assisted living, the memory care center where she was every day for, I don't know, 2 to 3 years, every single day. And he showed up in time for dinner. He sat with her and eventually fed her when she could no longer hold a fork or spoon. He schlepped a boombox every single day, and he would play songs that somehow made it through to her dementia mind. And she would fill in words and sing songs with him. And, you know, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, whatever. It was really quite a sight to behold. It's impossible to talk about Paul without using big picture words, as everybody's been using here: compassion, integrity, kindness, patience. Essentially, we all talk about his character. And of course, that wry sense of humor, his easy laugh, his transformation from gentle giant to Anzio Fontini behind the wheel of a car, his pride and devotion to his kids and grandkids. Roberta and Paul used to come to Sonoma every summer, and it was really a highlight. Paul jumped at the chance to pick blackberries, to come to the farmer's market and choose just the perfect corn. The lazing about by the pool, doing what else? Crossword puzzles. During COVID, when travel was out of the question, I got into the habit of sending him photos from Sonoma, Allen's sunflowers, our overgrown early girl tomatoes, early morning balloons over Napa Valley, lush grapevines. He always had a response and often a story. I relished them. And we also had very serious conversations about the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry, when Klay Thompson would be back, and so on. Some of you probably know what I'm talking about. So, when I traveled from the left coast to Staten Island, his long arms open wide, Laura and I were blended into his family. What a gift to be an honorary Martin and California moms to the lovely Tess, who luckily for us lives in the Bay Area. But perhaps the biggest gift of all was seeing what a loving, intimate relationship looks like up close. I absorbed Roberta and Paul's 40-year romance and found my own loving life partner, Alan. I used to tell him, everyone needs a Paul in their life. He would probably say his or her. I still take photos during my early morning walks, looking at the vineyards and sunrises through what I imagine with Paul's eyes. There is a new ache in my heart whenever I imagine him there at the other end of my text, my calls, my visits. I really can't imagine a world without him in it. Rest in peace, dearest Paul. I love and miss you to the stars.
Morning, everyone. I am Laura, the other Atalma sister from the West Coast, and this is my take, my remarks for our beloved Paul. The doors to the hotel ballroom had just closed as everyone took their seats for a sold-out, gigantic corporate luncheon, typically programmed for the business community, with a keynote speaker, an awards presentation, and a panel of experts on something, well, financial districting. The youngish, beautiful, professionally groomed business librarian was last to arrive, running a bit behind schedule and somewhat flustered and out of breath. When she opened the doors to the ballroom and scanned the massive room to find a seat, she noticed there were two available, one next to a woman and the other next to a good-looking man. Strategic as she was, she thought to herself, now, which one am I going to take? The answer was obvious. She knew what she was doing, and she sat down next to Paul Ross Martin Sr. Thankfully, that became the best decision she ever made. That woman was, of course, my mother, Roberta Joan Gardner, and that luncheon was the start of an almost 40-year love affair, a journey of friendship, laughter, devotion, and above all, a blending of families that included 8 children. As Evie said, we were number 7 and 8, the bonus ones, and a combined 14 grandchildren, I think, and now 4 great-grandchildren, some of whom they sadly never had a chance to meet. I'm so grateful that Paul became a second father to me and stayed that way for more than half my life. It's hard to really remember them as ever being separate from one another, because at least when we were all together in California or in New York or on vacation, they became a pair, practically inseparable. I thought my mom was a true feminist before her time, maintaining her own apartment and independence. But when they retired, I really do think she was just so happy to spend 7 days a week with Paul. They traveled together, enjoyed music and theater in the park together, had tons of friends together, finished crossword puzzles, read voraciously out loud to one another, and made corny jokes. Well, that was mostly my mom. And together, they adored their entire family clan. Their routine was well known. Don't call them before noon on weekend days or you may get a quick brush off, because they love to start their day slowly, eating big bowls of cereal with fruit, reading, and never seeming to tire of each other's company. Paul was as huge of an incentive as our mom was for Ace and me and Evie and her family to make sure we came to Staten Island to see them, even more urgently after Roberta passed away 2 years ago. Being in New York without seeing Paul was almost unthinkable. We would sometimes stop and bring shopping bags of delicious food from the best delis we could, often eat out, maybe run errands on Staten Island, where he would proudly tell us at every stoplight how many seconds we would have to wait before it turned green. And of course, we would always visit Roberta at sunrise. Our devotion to him was unconditional, as was his love for us. But that doesn't even compare to his devotion to Roberta. Many of us marveled over this incredible and genuine love day in and day out. They seemed to have their own language through my mom's increasing dementia, which included singing songs together and sharing photos of their growing family. Nothing stopped Paul. All too often, people of true brilliance grow arrogant. Paul was one of the rare ones. He never had the slightest hint of arrogance. What he had that is so rare was a full-hearted gentleness and kindness towards everyone. It was this that allowed his brilliance to shine all the brighter. I am devastated he is gone, but grateful to have seen him just a few weeks ago on our last trip to New York. The lesson for me is this: if you love someone, tell them, show up. Life and love get taken away from us so unexpectedly. You never, ever want to be left wishing you had just made a little more effort. Through the quick and painful ordeal of Paul's passing, I saw our step siblings, soul brothers and soul sisters, nieces and nephews, do everything in their power to hold him with love and comfort in his final 2 weeks. With nothing but abundant respect and love in our hearts for all of you, please know that your California family will always be here for whatever you need. Thank you for the honor of letting me speak this morning.
Thank you so much, Laura. I appreciate the crossword puzzle rush off. The exact phrasing was, when you're on the phone, well, this crossword puzzle is not going to do itself. So that's when you know he was ready to go. But I, again, just want to thank everybody for sharing their hearts today, including Laura and Evie and my siblings. My dad was really blessed with, in addition to everything else, 3 amazing daughters who brought him so much comfort in his final days. So I especially want to acknowledge my sister Barbara, who inherited my father's aversion to the spotlight. So, and also want to acknowledge my brother Paul, who's unfortunately able to make it today. But happy to share that he's doing well. And as my dad would say, we continue to live in hope. And so I'm grateful he was able to, thanks to my sister Monica, say goodbye to him on the phone. For better or worse, I did not inherit my father's obsession with grammar, but I thought I would just try to at least emulate, as Eric said, all his positivity, his humor, and his kindness. And on that thought, just in terms of being positive, you think about someone who earned the right to complain in life, everything Eric talked about, in addition to losing his sister at an early age, and having no father. It amazes me what a great father he was without ever having a father to show him the ropes. And having that medical condition, he could never play sports. And amazing to me that he could be such a great sports dad without ever having played, and saying the same thing at the end of every game, just good game, sport, nothing else. And maybe something about coach's antics, but so how could I ever complain? And not to mention that if I did complain, I inadvertently end up splitting an infinitive or dangling a participle. That would never end well. And I don't know if people know on the humor part, one of his responsibilities at the Wall Street Journal was to write something called an A-head, a certain headline, that always had a pun. So I can tell you, he loved that. And he even loved, especially coming home and explaining the pun. So they say, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I'm pretty sure in that sense, he never worked a day in his life. And as a side note to my kids, just imagine having a dad whose job was to correct grammar and to write dad jokes. So it could be worse. And lastly, on his kindness, to me, what that felt like, I think we've all felt that different ways. To me, it was just unconditional love. I never felt judged. I always felt encouraged. I always felt heard, and I always felt cared for, and I always felt like an only child. And even if we didn't always have all the material things that we thought we wanted, we always felt the abundance of his love. I always felt like his presence was a blessing, and now his memory is our blessing. And I'll finish up with one anecdote. Being the youngest, I have to be a little obnoxious sometimes, or the second to youngest, sorry. We had a birthday party, and I sent out all the invitations, but he got a special one. It had a lot of grammar errors and missing commas and gasp, or a missing hyphen or two. And so I thought I'd have some fun with him on that. But what really impressed me was his reaction. I'm sure inside he was wondering where he had gone wrong, raising, etc. But the amazing thing was he never actually called me. Instead, he called around to all my siblings. Did you get through his invitation? Well, did you notice anything about it? You didn't notice the grammatical mistakes? So he found out that the joke was on him, but, and I'm sure he was secretly very relieved to know that I wasn't actually that bad. But the lesson was on me. His kindness, as always, ultimately carried the day. So today, I'm just grateful for this man and thank you all for celebrating his life, his positivity, his humor, and his kindness. Thank you. Next, we want to hear from any grandchildren, some of whom did inherit his love of language and thoughts about their PPI. And they've all recently applied for colleges. And so we thought that we'd give them a prompt, like, what's your favorite PPI memory? If they could share that. And also want to acknowledge my daughter, Jackie, who had to take a test on Friday, and we had a great plan for her to take the red eye in, which got canceled along with all the other flights. So wish she could be here today and sharing with me about her feedback. With that, anyone? Yes.
I didn't follow the prompts.
Good girl.
First of all, I wanted to say that I don't know how you adult people do this. Listen to everyone bare their hearts and then go up here and try to talk. And the second thing I wanted to say was that I think the greatest testament to PIPA is how much I love everyone who just spoke and how deeply I know you all. Thank you. So this is adapted based on a poem that I wrote for PIPA that I'm gonna speak for Judy. Judy asked me to.
The night before PIPA died.
PIPA. Your wit, your love, your humor always leave us wanting more and surprise us. Your sauciness, sweetness and spice are never quite what I expect from a grandma. To be generous where others are stingy, to listen or try to where others just talk. Your rampant sweet tooth, surprising, well, not anymore. Firm love squeezes you inherited from your mom. We share a finger, you and I. This one. I call it my peepaw finger, but I aspire to share much more with you than that. Your temperament, your coolness under pressure, your relentless humor, even in the face of the enemy, as you called some of the hospital attendants. I'm reading about love again, bell hooks, and you have practiced it, going to see Roberta every day. I wish I could have gone to see you. And I'm so glad that I came home this Christmas. A sleepover with you, words with friends, snuggling on the couch, listening to you read out loud, enchanted by your fun facts about a partridge in a pear tree. You could make anything interesting. I hope you know how loved you are. I hope you saw how all the love you gave rebounded back to you. I hope you know what a gift you were, the rare person who always leaves you wanting more. Love, Tess.
PIPA was always my on-call and unjudgmental grammar coach. Well, everyone's. One of our last correspondences went as follows. Hi, peeps, I wrote. Just wondering, is there a correlation? Just wondering, is there a correlation between grand meaning 1000 and grand meaning third generation, like grandparent? Maybe I was forcing this etymological connection, or maybe I just wanted an excuse to talk with peeps. Mandy, we replied.
I like your logic, but the use of grand to refer to money dates from the early 1900s and comes from America's underworld. $1,000 was considered to be a grand sum of money, and the underground adopted grand as code word for $1,000. Grandparents are simply grand people. And Peaks was the grandest. The sweetest man with the sweetest tooth, swing dancing on Oxman's roof each week and Boulder Dash, always arriving promptly to every birthday bash, assuming he was wearing his driver's cap. Basketball tips and Lancaster trips, every hyphen in its place, no juju fruit going to waste. Once a boy whose greatest gift was an orange, soon made his way to the top of the Big Apple. Maybe it was all the Scrabble. Grammarian in love with the librarian, through deep unwavering love, showed me finding your soulmate is not the most impossible thing. Every card signed with love, every email starting with Dear Panda, socially distanced hangs on the veranda. Words with friends turned into words with Peepaw. I attempted to compete. Unfortunately, Peeps never missed a beat. Whistling, so put another nickel in the Nickelodeon. What an appropriate farewell on the anniversary of Martin Luther King.
I also didn't follow the prompt. Every year, the Martin family gathers on a little slice of New Jersey coast called Ocean Beach. I know my grandfather won't be at the shore this year, but he'll return with us for as long as we go. His humble legacy lives within his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Those of us who are lucky enough to call him Peepaw. Through the decades and through the generations, I'm proud to be a Martin because of what I see when I look around this room. What he was and what we all aspire to be. He was gracious when he needed grace. He was a friend when he needed a friend. He was a laugh when he needed to laugh. He cared when he needed someone to care. He loved when he needed to be loved. I didn't prepare anything, but I wanted to share a few stories that follow the Peepaw had a great ability where, despite his enormous family, he made everyone feel individually loved and heard. And even though we were in California, he was always able to make an effort to make it feel like we'd seen him every day of our lives. There was one time, last time we were at the shore, where he came over while I was preparing our family's dinner for the night, and was sitting there while we were making tacos, chopping up making the salsas, and was chatting with us, telling us about his life, his mother, his childhood, and singing all the songs that he used to communicate with the people in his life who no longer speak. But he had these songs that would get them singing. And he was singing them to us, me and my sister, and telling us about what they meant, where they came from. I mean, the whole time we're sitting there with margaritas, and I thought he only drank sherry. Because every night, every week, when Roberto was around on the shore, right around, I think it was 2 p.m. here. Oh, where's the sherry? So a little bit in, I go, oh, would you like a drink? Like, I'm sure we've got some sherry over, or like a margarita if you want. He said, well, I thought you'd never ask. And sat there and drank margarita with us and told us about his life. And there was another time a little bit earlier when I was on the other side of the world, lifeguarding and surfing. And despite the distance, I got an email from him reaching out to ask about a grammar question. He was wondering about the history and origin and meaning of a word he'd heard that he didn't know where it came from. And that's the word grom, which means a young surfer. And if you're wondering, it comes from the word gremlin, as in those little gremlins keep stealing all my waves. But I was on the other side of the world and had an amazing email exchange with him, and I think Anna was on it too. And he just felt good for him to reach out and ask me about something that he knew I could help him out with and could connect on. You know, he loved words, and I grew up in a word where we use a lot of made up words that you guys would think sounded insane. So it was great for him in all these moments where we never, where you'd think it would be hard to keep that connection. And he'd always reach out and take the one-on-one time to make you feel special, heard, and loved. And I'll always remember that and take that with me to all my relationships. Thank you. Oh, yeah. So I think the grandchildren are spoken for, and if anyone else wanted to, we'll have some time later this afternoon too, but my cousin John will say something, and if anybody else wants to, of course.
I just wanted, didn't prepare any remarks, but I really just on behalf of the Denton family, really gonna miss Uncle Paul, as we called him. I mean, some of our earliest memories are the Martins coming over for Easter. A lot of events, playing basketball, always on our gravel driveway, always an unfair advantage for us that played on it every day. But another great memory was we would always go during the summer exchange, and every other summer, myself and my two brothers would go and spend the week at the Martins, and the girls would go the opposite direction. And I still have very fond memories of going with Uncle Paul to his work, taking Staten Island Ferry. I think it was 10 cents. It's one thing that's actually gone down in price. Going to get pizza. I felt so proud of myself that I went back to Morris County and I knew the correct way to eat a pizza and fold it in half. I remember going into the Wall Street Journal and making a Xerox copy of a $1 bill. It was just so incredibly cool at the time. And I recall him giving me 25 cents because I knew who was buried in Trinity Church once when we were passing by. I think it's Aaron Burr, maybe. Alexander Hamilton. But I really feel blessed because being so close to Julia and Greg and Tess and Amanda and Rory, living in the same town, our relationship expanded beyond those kind of early days. And so really got to spend a lot of time at Julia's house with Uncle Paul or out in Denville, or going down to the shore. So he's really somebody, just a great guy to talk to. As everybody said, a very kind person who was, at least with me and my siblings as well, from our earliest memories up until I think the last time I saw him was over at your place, Julia, for yeah, fairly recently. So really going to miss him, but we have a lot of great memories of him. So to sing Amazing Grace is,
Yeah, let's get one song first, right?
what's that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna play a few verses to be simple, and then we're gonna do Amazing Grace.
Okay. And
Sorry,
this is
but
my
let's go.
sister Eileen and my mother Jeanette, who was with us all along the way from those family events in Brookside, all until recently. It's gonna sit. Bring this over or?
Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. True simplicity has been to bow and to bend we shall, to turn and be on tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift that we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the Christmas tree, and we in the valley Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear, the I first believed. The Lord has promised to me, His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
I just wanted to say one thing which I feel might have been left out, which is, seeing my dad day after day, always every day with this smile, beaming smile and great attitude. And what an example for my kids. And I'm really going to try hard to be that way. Yay, Barbara.
Always has to have the last word. But thank you, everyone. That kind of concludes the program. And again, just so appreciative of everyone for coming and sharing. I think Monica said, this legacy, let's all pay it forward. It's the best we can do and hold his memory in our hearts. After this, at the Staten, a little bit down the road, where all Staten Island events are held. If anyone wants to join us there, we greatly appreciate it. If not, again, thank you so much for coming and being part of this celebration. Thank you.
I made sure I didn't have my rear end in the camera.